All right. Thank you for allowing me to, participate on this topic. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time, and this is the first time I've actually had a chance to put it in a PowerPoint presentation. So hopefully it won't be more than 20 minutes. But this is a starting point for this conversation. So thank you. And to get started. Might take a minute for me to advance the slide. All right, there we go. So just to kind of get started, a lot of you have heard about, DEI. You've probably seen it on grant applications, job applications. But that's probably the extent of it. It's a requirement to have it in there. But DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I like to add the word accessibility into it. And it was coined in like the 1980s by Lewis Griggs. He was one of the first ones to develop, online diversity training programs and talk about this in general. And he faced a lot of uphill battles in getting this started, but thankfully, he's been able to guide and inspire a lot of us, especially in environmental education. So the goal of this presentation is to kind of talk about how we can increase the reach of our messaging to different groups, and ultimately, in the big picture, encourage and get people to use our parks and natural areas who previously were unable to or didn't feel comfortable. So first, I'm going to set the stage as to why this topic is important, and then kind of link it to invasive species and environmental education in general. Talk about things that we've done and things that you can incorporate into your programs, and some of the challenges that people face, in starting a program like this. So to set the stage, accessibility. Approximately 40 million people in America have some form of disability. This is according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And according to the National Park Service, at least 28 million visitors, and they did say this is a conservative number, at least with some type of disability from anywhere part of the world, visited the national parks annually. And if you scale it down, we've been talking about this, or the state has been talking about accessibility for a while. And thanks to a couple of programs, I forget the name of it, but Kelly's Wish or something. This is a cool program, and they fundraise, and I think they assisted in getting some electric wheelchairs at Michigan Park. So we have, as far as I know, 7 of them. And accessibility is an issue. People want to visit the natural resources, and according to O'Kelly, he's from the DNR, the Grand State Haven State Park, which received its track chair at the end of March, has already 53 reservations. So once they have it, people are finding out about it and are interested in using, things to get them out and about. One of the things that occurred in the last couple of years was a census. And there's a lot of data that was being tracked, and we're finding that Michigan demographics are changing, and it's changing, and it's becoming more different than it was 10 years ago. So for example, the Asian population has increased by about 40%. They found like about 95,000 plus people. Hawaiian Pacific Islander populations in Michigan have increased by 17%, and this is comparing from 2010 to 2020. Another factor that they looked at, in some of the different census populations were the diversity score. And they examined counties in Michigan. And so a diversity score of 50% means, the chances of someone being diverse is, 50%, if that was the score. And in 2010, only Wayne County had a diversity score over 50%. But as of 2020, joining Wayne County were places like Ingham, Chippewa, Washtenaw, Saginaw, and Oakland County. And so if you look at this figure, this is from the MPPR. They pulled some of this research, so I didn't make these graphs. I pulled it from another source, and I can provide that for you later. They looked at total immigrant population, and in 2010, you had about 591,000 people, and in 2019, the total immigrant population was over 600,000, 684,197. And so if you break that number down, you're getting a lot more visa holders, refugees and asylums, undocumented residents, lawful residents, green card holders, etc. And so we are getting different people into our state. And if you look at the region of origin, we are seeing, as reflected in the stats above, more Asian populations, European, Latin American are a couple of the big new populations that we're seeing, or shifts in population. So that's quite exciting. And if you look at things from a county perspective, and Washtenaw County is one of the ones in my jurisdiction, about 40.8% of immigrants in Washtenaw County arrived in the States before 2000. But since 2010, there has been an increase by 20.3%. So in 2010, it was about 38,122, and now there's over 45,000. And if you look at the bottom square, there's definitely a large increase in the Asian population. And I picked and chose a couple of counties because I want to show that this change, it may not be the same everywhere. The numbers may not be as big in some areas. It might be smaller in some areas, but we are seeing changes, whether it's, like 20 people or whether it's the order of thousands. So for example, in Leelanau County, there was an increase seen by 11.1%. So it went from 583 to 648. And while that may not seem like a large jump, over time, if you have a small community, it is quite significant. Taking a look at Chippewa County, it increased by 10.7%. So, orders just over 100 people. But if you're looking at the region of origin, perhaps we're seeing like more North Americans, so maybe Canadians. It's always good to see more Canadians, and maybe some Mexican. So maybe that's the North American statistic, but we are seeing still increases in other areas as well. If you look at Ottawa County, it did see on a percentage decrease, so it decreased by 7.1%. But still, there is, the total number did increase a little bit. So that's something to kind of think about. But if you look at the county over, there is an increase by 24.6%. So these differences are occurring across the state, and there also may be differences, between neighboring counties. And most of us manage, multiple counties. And so it behooves us to kind of think about and cater our services and think about what's happening in each of our counties to some degree, a little bit differently, to understand, who is living in these counties. And if you look at, some of the considerations that we might want to include in our programming is maybe language consideration. So this is a map. You've probably have seen this floating all over social media. And this is a very important map because you can see that if you exclude English and Spanish as a language, the next most spoken language in Michigan is actually Arabic. And that's something that, people are not familiar with. And if you look in other places of the country, so all of this orange, that means that the third language is Arabic. And then I believe in these areas, it's Vietnamese. And so there's different languages in different areas. And so that's kind of exciting to see. And so that's why we need to kind of think about expanding our toolkit in terms of education and outreach. So why is it important to, focus or at least consider immigrants? So in 2019, immigrants in Michigan had approximately $20.3 billion in spending power. This is after paying taxes. And so when you have an extraordinary amount of money, and yes, people may be saving it, they may be sending it, home to families, but recognize that a lot of people are also spending money on the same things, immigrants, that, citizens are. And that is, like health and food and groceries. But people are also building their capital, and it allows them to potentially spend money on things like travel, recreation, maybe buying a second vacation house. And, I didn't put this in the slide, but we are seeing more people traveling north, traveling west to take advantage of our beautiful beaches. And I know Phyllis did an amazing job, setting that, the why about this. And people are now able to maybe think about traveling and doing things that they may have not been able to do otherwise. And especially when you have families that are moving in, the first, few years, it might be hard because you're saving the money. But when they have kids, and now those kids are growing up, child of immigrants, that someone like me, they, they're learning about different things. They see their friends fishing and hunting. And so that's inspiring some of the kids of immigrants to maybe consider trying new things. And so it's worth reaching out. And I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more changes in who's attending our outreach activities. There's another paper, which I didn't mention here, but there's definitely an increase in the amount of Latinx students and youth participating in programs. And that has been a good discussion. There's a lot of programs out there. And I think it's, something that we in Michigan could work on, trying to build up ways that we can incorporate, youth into these programs. Another thing that's important to think is, reaching out to immigrant people is important, and other diverse groups, is because there's a lot of travel involved. The times are changing. People have more accessible, are more able to, purchase and save up for plane tickets. When I was growing up, our family went to India maybe once every 10 years, but now I'm seeing friends and family of this generation or younger generations, they're able to visit their homeland, maybe every 2 years, every year, barring things like COVID. So people are traveling locally, nationally, internationally, and people are not aware of invasive species in general. So of that, they may not have that scientific background, or they may not pay attention to it. And so what they may see is an insect that, that is here. So for example, the spotted lanternfly, they may recognize it from back home, but they didn't recognize it as being a problem because it wasn't a problem back home. So why should we be concerned about that here? And a lot of folks, even, those of us that are born and raised here, there's still a lot of plants out there that are native to Michigan and Ontario that I have no idea what they are, what they look like. And so if we have issues identifying native species from invasives, then it's also challenging from someone who's new here. And so in addition, to visiting homeland, people are also trying to bring back hard to find items here, maybe specific foods, maybe seeds, water from certain holy rivers. And people are wearing, like equipment, like shoes and gear that they've, maybe walked around at, Dahlem Nature Center, or they went for a walk along the river trail. But then, a couple of weeks later, they're on a plane going home. So maybe there are some seeds that they're bringing from here to there or there to here. So that's a vector that should also be considered. Shipping packages we'll talk about in the next slide. And also, Americans are also traveling. So there's a lot more opportunities for international work, international vacation. Study abroad is huge in the state of Michigan. I know Michigan State is a leader in that. So people are able to look on the internet, feel more comfortable navigating new places, and they may also use their gear here and then go abroad and use it there. So there's a vector in that from that perspective as well. In the age of shipping and receiving packages, again, I got this package from Russia, and someone very lovingly packaged, a dried up pine, and I'm like, oh, I better Ziploc that and put it in a double bag garbage. So people are sending things that perhaps they probably shouldn't be including in packages. And there's bugs in your garage, and it's kind of getting all over the place. So by including, other diverse groups, everybody can actually benefit. So some people especially with accessibilities, people have temporary disabilities from surgery. You have people who are pregnant, who may benefit from more benches or shade. You've got blended families, families with immigrants and non-immigrants. You've got students and out-of-town visitors, out-of-country visitors, maybe even out-of-planet visitors. Not yet, but maybe one day. So I hope I set the stage up for for why we should be doing some of these things. And here's some of the things that we've been doing at JLW CISMA is we've been trying to incorporate different languages and outreach materials. That does help when you have a variety of international connections. But keep in mind that when you do these things, it's important that quality control and due diligence is done. If you are active on social media, things like using different hashtags, following, international groups, sharing accessibility articles on your social media or your website could be beneficial, and it inspires your partners in that sense. And you also don't want to spend a lot of time recreating the wheel. So you can look for existing resources. Play Clean Go has a variety of translated and Spanish materials. National Park Services have a ton of things that are maps and programs and guides. And if you look at them, sometimes you can actually go to the English one, see where they talk about invasive species, and see if you can find that in the translated version. And I've been able to do that with a variety of programs and papers and stuff. And even places like the Nature Conservancies have partners that they've translated and created reports in different languages. So you can share those. I'm sure they won't mind. From an accessibility standpoint, people are starting to use alternative text for pictures. And this is extremely beneficial for those that have low vision or blind. And basically they're able to get a sense of what picture has been accompanying the text. And if you use this, you can be as precise as possible, be accurate, place that picture into context, so they feel included and they have access to that information as well. So if you are creating videos and doing closed captioning, a couple of things to kind of think about, subtitle placements. Think about where you're putting it, making sure that subtitles don't obscure speakers' mouths because people are maybe relying it on lip reading. And you also want to make sure that whatever subtitle you're putting on, it's not going to obscure important information that's going to be appearing later on in the slide. And I know the BBC Academy has some information on guidelines for that as well. And to also consider reducing barriers to your outreach program. So maybe consider hosting things at facilities with ramps that are accessible, wheelchair accessible, docks with portable boat launches, have places with benches and shades, bridges with even entrances, because sometimes wheelchairs cannot easily go across bridges if the lip is too high, and also build diverse partnerships. And so I think I'm running a little bit out of time. So just think outside the box. Keep in mind some challenges, time and fatigue. If you keep using the same partner over and over again, they may be fatigued and they may not, get the benefit or recognition that they feel that allows them to continue to do this. They may have limited capacity and they may not see themselves reflected in agencies, partners, or outreach. And so there might be a lack of buy-in to get started. It does take time, be upfront and follow through. And invasive species may not be a priority, especially when you're worried about food and rent. So don't worry. I mean, you may not hear back from people. It takes time. I mean, I've spent years going on this and, people not responding, but once you find that person, it's helpful and things will get going. And, it's helpful. I've been able to do a lot of this stuff because I have a supportive partnership and my fiduciary also believes in this. So I was really lucky for that. And by incorporating your partners into some of this messaging, you don't have jurisdiction in some of these areas. So you may not be able to do things yourself, but your partners may do. And that's the beauty of the CISMA. We have a really great partnership. This is our community. We are familiar, and I think it behooves us to understand what's going on in our community And we are able to, quickly customize materials and address some of those nature gaps and address some of those challenges. Not all of them, but some of them we can, and perhaps we can work with state agencies and all to continue this conversation and to figure out what we can and cannot do.